If you've always written by the seat of your pants, or if you have never outlined a book, or if you've never written a book, this is the perfect video for you because today we're going to be talking about the bare bones basics of how to outline a book. Let's get started. Welcome back everyone, my name is David Webb and I made this channel to give you the best tips on writing and creativity so you can finally finish your book or have that creative career you've always dreamed of. Today we're going to jump into the basics of how to outline a book. If you're not sure on whether or not you should outline a book, be sure to check that video up right there because that is going to give you a brief overview on the pros and cons of outlining a book. If you're still not sold on whether or not you should try outlining a book, let me just comfort you with this. People are scared off from outlining in general because they remember it from school in being one of the most painful parts of writing an essay. This literally didn't even occur to me until today, when I took a good hard look at why people hate outlines so much. Yeah, there are a few other reasons. People will say it limits their creativity in a way. Others will say that they simply can't write with an outline. And it's all kind of nonsense. It's all an excuse for not doing something you don't want to do or something that you don't think you would be good at. Because as I covered in my previous video, anyone can write with an outline. It doesn't take a specific personality to do so. We're not locked in place one way or the other. But all that to say, you can learn to write with an outline. You can learn to enjoy it. I know I have, and it has helped me so much. So without any further ado, let's just jump right into it. There are a million ways to outline a book. There is no one set prescriptive method to do so, even though that's what some people think. That's what some people will tell you. You don't have to sit down and write out a full page on what happens on each individual chapter. Your outline doesn't even have to be a full page long. It can be if you want it to be. It depends on how much detail you want to go into with the outlining stage. I personally don't believe that outlines need to be incredibly descriptive of exactly what happens in the story, but it can be. There's nothing really wrong with either approach. Because this is outlining for beginners, I'm not going to sit here today and spend an hour on how to write a 30-page outline for your novel. I'm going to give you a technique that I've used multiple times to write several books that's really easy to get into. So where do we start? Well, just like any good book, we start at the beginning. Not. We're going to start at the very end of the book. And I know it sounds incredibly counterintuitive, but you know, subverting expectations. That's right, we are going to start at the very end of the book. Moving forward, I am going to assume that you already have the basic premise for your book. You know generally the setting, the characters, and the main conflict. And that's the most important thing, is that you know the conflict of the story and you have a good idea of who you want your main character to be. This method doesn't really work if you're just starting from complete scratch. You must have a good idea. And I have done a video on how to come up with a good book idea, so if you haven't seen that already, be sure to check that out now. But assuming you already have your idea, you want to take a good hard look at what you want the end of your story to look like. And oftentimes that's the easiest to imagine. And a lot of people do this subconsciously and they don't even realize it because they want to write the best story possible. And subconsciously they know that's going to resonate with the reader most at the end of the book, because that's the magic moment when the climax hits and the resolution comes together and the reader gets that full takeaway of what the story was about. It's at the end of the story that they truly understand what the story means to them. So if you can sit back right now and look at the end of your story and think about what you want the reader to take away from the book, that'll give you a good idea of how you want the story to end. Does it end with some dramatic victory of good over evil? Does it end in a tragic, ironic twist that leaves the reader reeling? Does the detective catch the murderer? Decide first on how you want your reader to feel at the end of your story, and it'll give you a lot of clarity of what you want the rest of your book to look like. So what comes next? We go backwards to the middle? No, we're gonna go back to the very beginning. This is when you take a look at the end of your story and you decide what makes most sense for the beginning. What's gonna make the most dramatic change in your main character's life from the beginning of the book until the end. If your book finishes with a major victory, you could have it start with no victory in sight and the characters in major trouble. If you want the end of your story to be the tragic downfall of a man, personally, financially, relationally, everything, then the natural start of the story would be him in a very successful career with a very loving wife and an incredible family. You see where I'm going with this? if you know the end of your story, it will in most cases tell you where the natural beginning of the story is. It's more difficult to start with the beginning of a story and try to figure out where it could go from there. And then finally, what's left but the messy middle. This part becomes a lot easier to write because a lot of writers start not knowing where the story is going to end, and therefore they're not exactly sure what to put in the middle. But when you know the end of the story, when you know the beginning of the story, it's more or less fill in the blank. It's a puzzle to figure out how the character got from point A to point C, and write that as point B. And yes, I get it, I'm making this sound a lot more simple than it really is, but again, this is an introduction to outlining, and this is a way that I've discovered over the years is really helpful to write a powerful emotional story that will resonate with the reader. That more or less is how to write a very basic outline. I'm going to go into more detail in a future video, probably very soon, on exactly what I do when writing an outline, how I take this concept and turn it into something bigger. But I wanted to give you a brief idea of how easy outlining really is, and the fact that you don't need to be scared of it. It's not your high school teacher standing over you saying, all right, you need the intro, 3 supporting paragraphs, and a conclusion. That's not what outlining is, especially a fiction book. I mean, the principles kind of are the same, but it's not the same. Trust me, this is entirely different and something that will actually probably help you write your story, especially if you're writing by the seat of your pants and you're finding yourself not knowing where the story is going or you're getting stuck. Outlining can really help. But for now, take that, think on it, and I will be back in a video very soon elaborating further on how to turn this into a more complete outline. You don't want to miss that video, so be sure to subscribe and then hit the bell to stay notified of all future uploads if you haven't already. Thank you again for watching. My name is David Webb, and get some writing done.